Welcome to This Week in Wrestling History.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sneaky Pete's, the only podcast about playing a rogue in Dungeons & Dragons based on the character Pete from Goof Troop and a Goofy Movie. We're your hosts, Ryan and Jacob.
Wow, that's something.
Yeah, it's getting tougher to come up with these. All right, anyways, we're here with Bash at the Beach, 1996.
You're not even going to introduce the podcast?
No.
This Week in Wrestling History? No?
Come on, at this point, I think everyone knows what they're listening to.
So yeah, Bash at the Beach 96. I wonder what happens here.
Right. I think unlike Survivor Series 97, we're not going to slow roll this one. This was flat out the NWO. It's the formation of the NWO, literally.
Yeah,
the New World Organization.
No.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, this was, aside from that, a relatively forgettable pay-per-view.
Right. So unlike Survivor Series, where we talked about everything on the undercard and then kind of, big surprise, the main event.
Right.
The undercard of Survivor Series was really good. The undercard of this was not.
No, I mean, really the only thing out of any of this that I would say is worth going back to watch would probably be Rey Mysterio versus Psychosis.
Yeah, which, hey, they had that on the UCW pay-per-view.
Right. And shocking, you can watch that and then skip forward to the main event.
Yeah, the rest of this ends up real bad. So that's our opening match is... Technically, it's our opening match is actually the sixth match of the night for the crowd. So this was the entire pay-per-view ended up having 14 matches on it. The Bash at the Beach itself was 3 hours. I'm guessing main event, the show that was on before it, had to be a solid. It may have been 1 hour, but it may have been 2.
I mean, considering that all of the longest match on that that pre-show kind of card was 5 minutes.
So here's the thing that makes me think it may have been 2 hours, is because that show usually ran on TBS from 6:05 to 8:05 on Saturday nights.
Ew.
And the pay-per-view then would have been 8 to 11, which is about the right time for a pay-per-view.
Were they doing their pay-per-views on Saturday nights?
I believe so at this point in time.
So they were running it like Sunday Night Heat.
Right.
Where you'd watch Heat on broadcast TV, and then you would switch over to the pay-per-view, and it would just kind of segue into it.
Exactly. It would, like, as far as the audience was concerned, it was one into another thing.
You know what they should do? They should bring that back.
Where they actually have, like, the pre-show on normal TV.
Yeah. I mean, you want to get your talent out, especially these cruiserweight guys. Have 205 Live on Sundays before the pay-per-view.
Right. Actually have it be a legitimate show as opposed to it being this giant, forgettable, commercial-filled mess that it is now.
Yeah. I mean, also considering that now I would almost guarantee Fox, as part of this big deal with SmackDown, would gobble up 205 Live.
Oh, especially put it on FS1?
Yeah.
And then, segue right into your pay-per-view? Yeah.
FS1 Sunday nights at 7.
Yeah.
Have like 3 matches or so, and then have the actual...
Right, have an actual proper pre-show again instead of like this annoying talking head panel thing, which that would be great for WrestleMania.
I mean, even if you had a little bit of that.
You have a little bit, but right now it's like 80% people sitting around talking.
And then one match.
In one match that's super forgettable.
Right. If they were to... And you want to do something even better with it, do that where we have 3 matches, little bits of talking here and there, talking up the pay-per-view, simulcast it on the WWE Network.
Yep.
And then segue it right into the pay-per-view that's going to be on the network.
Yeah. That'd be much better than their current game plan of every pay-per-view now has like an hour or 2 of pre-game stuff that has like one match and a bunch of just recappy nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, look at what WrestleMania, the pre-show started at what?
I'm going to guess 4, maybe 3.
Yeah, it was something awful like that.
Yeah, it was really ridiculous. Because the card itself was like 5 to 6 hours,
Yeah.
right? And I think with the pre-show it was 7 to 8.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
It's too much.
As much as I love wrestling, I don't want to put in a work day.
That's just what I was about to say. It's literally a work day's worth of sitting there. I don't want to sit anywhere, especially in a stadium on those seats, for 8 hours.
Yeah, and it's not one of those where you think you could just kind of pop up and, I've seen what I've wanted to see, let me go home now. You paid hundreds of dollars for this ticket.
Yeah.
You better stay for the entire 8 hours.
Right. I mean, I suppose as far as like value for your dollar time-wise, it's pretty great, but
right.
But you're literally paying hundreds of dollars to go sit in a stadium seating packed in with drunk people
And pay for overpriced hot dogs and beer.
Oh, yeah. Which you're going to have to get because you're stuck there for 8 hours. You're going to have at least a meal at the venue.
Right.
Which,
maybe 2.
Right. Which is going to cost you, I would say, at minimum $25
each
per person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what an awful expenditure of time and money that is.
All right.
Anyways, back to the actual pay-per-view that we were watching here.
Tirade over.
All right, Bash at the Beach 96. As we were saying, we open with Rey Mysterio in Psychosis. It was a decent match. There was only one thing wrong with the whole thing. Mike Tenay is your damn announcer.
Yeah. Mike Tenay has never been fantastic. I mean, he's got a great voice.
I disagree about everything on Mike Tenay. With the only thing he has a good amount of knowledge. I absolutely hate how he expresses himself. I hate his voice. I hate everything about Mike Tenay.
See, I don't mind his voice. I think as like a commentator, a radio host, something like that, he's definitely got a voice for it. However, the overall enunciations of some of his words and the random screaming expressions that he has.
He wants to be Mauro Ranallo, but he isn't.
Yeah. Was Mauro a thing during this time?
Oh, no.
Well, like, I know he had been doing some stuff, like, early on.
He was not nationally known.
Okay.
I think you're correct in that he probably actually was working in the business at this time, but no, he was not known anywhere. So, match itself, I mean, it was Rey Mysterio and Psychosis. It was good.
Yeah. I mean, for as slow and kind of sloppy as Psychosis gets as his career goes on, especially at being part of the Mexicools in SmackDown.
Yeah. At this time, he was really on point.
I mean, the best of his career at this point, I would say.
Yeah, and Ray was not at the peak of his kind of cruiserweight time, but
he's definitely
on the upward trajectory.
Yeah,
so.
He's on his way up, definitely.
Yep. Really good match. This is probably the last time we will say that for this show. All right. Because next, we have John Tenta versus Big Bubba with Jimmy Hart in a Carson City Silver Dollar match. You've seen the match, so you know what a Carson City Silver Dollar match is. Had you not seen the match, could you guess what the hell a Carson City Silver Dollar match is?
Not even close.
I guess if you win silver dollar. What?
Right. Like I would assume that there's, instead of like a box of Legos or something, there's a bunch of silver dollars somebody's going to get thrown onto.
But silver dollars wouldn't hurt.
But that's what I'm thinking
right,
it is.
Exactly. So what it is shocking for WCW. It's something on a pole match.
Yeah.
It's a sack of silver dollars, which supposedly you're going to get and then crack your opponent in the head with.
So it's like the soap in a sock thing.
Pretty much. I mean...
Or nickels in a sock.
Yeah, I suppose a sock full of silver dollars getting cracked in the head would significantly hurt.
I mean, you'd probably be unconscious afterwards, but
it's a silly premise. Like, Have you ever been threatened with a sock full of silver dollars? Like, is that a thing? Is that
I can't say that I have. But,
right? That's not really a thing. So,
but like you said, shocking for WCW, something on a pole match.
right. I mean, obviously that would become much worse in '99, and we're only in mid '96. But so the only thing I really liked about this match is I actually went back and I was like, wait, it's John Tenta? He's actually being announced as John Tenta. That's a little weird. What's up with that? So I went and looked it up. What had happened was he recently split with the Dungeon of Doom. And he's like, he came out and in Mean Gene, it was on Nitro the week before, kept calling him Shark. He's like, I'm not a shark. I'm not a fish. I'm not an avalanche either. My name is John Tenta. And that was actually kind of a cool promo from a guy that normally doesn't really cut promos. It wasn't amazing, but
it was essentially one of those, I'm not any of this stuff. I'm just this guy who's going to beat the hell out of you.
Right. It's like, I'm not these gimmicks. I'm a man. So what had happened is the week before, Big Bubba, a.k.a. Big Boss Man, had shaved half of his head and made him look ridiculous, and he came out with still just half of his head shaven. He's like, I'm a man. He did this to me. I kept it like this because every time I go outside, my neighbors laugh at me. Every time I look in the mirror, I feel ashamed, and I'm going to use that to kick this guy's ass. And he did.
Okay, yeah.
And that was fine. And that was a decent little 2 weeks of programming, honestly. It wasn't amazing, but what it was a transition away from these sillier characters into a more real...
We're moving out of the early 90s, late 80s gimmick.
Yes,
things.
over the top, non-real characters, exactly, into a more realism-based, hey, I'm a man, I'm a real human being, this is how I'm feeling. That aspect of things I liked. Putting a pole match between like 6'7" Earthquake and 6'6" Big Boss Man who aren't agile at all was dumb. It ends up that Jimmy Hart has to climb up this stupid pole to get the thing down for the guys. But
what they should have done, which would have made it a little bit better, have one of them just grab the pole and just bend it.
That would have been awesome if they had John Tenta just bend the pole.
He gets up on the second rope, grabs it, and just manhandles the thing straight down to him and takes the thing off.
That would have been how come they've never done that with a pole match? That would be amazing.
Have the one of the bigger guys, or even like now, and I know Vince McMahon will never do a on the pole match again.
Good, but
have Braun Strowman stand up on the second rope and just bend the thing down to him.
Right, that would actually be really good.
Announcers tote this thing as being a solid steel, complete all the way around, like solid piece of metal.
It's a solid,
and just have Braun be like, "Oh, you want me to climb this? Nope, I'll make it come to me."
Yeah, that would be amazing. Actually, I can't believe no one's ever done that. That would be great. Then you just have a bent hunk of metal there in the ring for the rest of the match. But that'd actually be kind of cool. Then you could throw someone into the thing and
sell it as still this big piece of metal.
Yeah,
it's bent down and have somebody
bounce another guy's head off of it or something.
Chest check the thing like they would a exposed ring post or something.
Yeah, that would be great. What a fantastic idea. That would have been much better than Jimmy Hart being a little squirrel running up this pole and then John Tenta getting the sock, cracks Big Bubba in the head with it, who, I mean, sells the thing like he was just shot, but...
Hey, that's one thing that you got to give Big Boss Man. Dude could sell.
Very much so. Dude made his smaller opponents, and, I mean, John Tenta being bigger than him, but he did make his opponents look great. His actual work, meh, being what it was, but he would sell his ass off for everyone, which is great, so... All right. So, the previous match, John Tenta versus Big Bubba, at least I liked the story going into it. If not, I didn't like the match. We're going downhill from here fast.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you put... So, on paper, DDP versus Jim Duggan should be a good match.
I don't know if I'd go that... So...
It should be better than John Tenta versus Big Bubba.
Correct. Here's the problem. We still had kind of flabby DDP.
Yeah,
we were still solid heel DDP.
He wasn't full on diamond cutter coming out with
With Kimberly, yeah.
Yeah.
No, so this was a match for the Lord of the Ring. I have no idea. That was apparently something DDP had previously won.
I don't even know what that is.
Apparently it was some dumb thing that was awarded previously. I'm guessing because they didn't actually want to put, I don't know, the TV title on DDP or something. Like, it seems like it was super contrived to just have this match be for a thing.
So was it like an actual ring
Yes,
that he was
it
wearing?
was like a Super Bowl ring.
So kind of like Cody's Ring of Honor that he was wearing for a
Yes.
while? Okay.
Or like Ric Flair's Hall of Fame ring in TNA, which was really funny because they had two TNA wrestlers feuding over a WWE Hall of Fame ring. Anyways, this was a taped fist match. This was dumb and bad, and DDP wins and whatever.
Moving on.
Yep. All right, next we had a double dog collar tag team match.
Why so many gimmicks?
Because WCW. This was the
Fair
Nasty Boys versus Public Enemy. Public Enemy was very hated in pretty much every locker room they've ever been in, it seems.
Yeah, from some of the stories that I've read is that it was one of those that people just did not like being near them.
Right. I think what happened was they really made a name for themselves in ECW, and apparently they got big fish in a small pond syndrome. And upon coming to WCW, they thought they were the world's greatest thing, and nope. And then they went to WWF for 12 minutes and got the shit kicked out of them by the Acolytes legitimately in a match, and that was the end of them. This match was, again, not good. Public Enemy and Nasty Boys, neither team is known for being technically sound. They're brawlers, and this was just an excuse for them to brawl around and whack each other with a chain, and then the chain breaks accidentally, and then they just finish the match. It was what it was. The Nasty Boys win. Moving on.
Yeah. I got nothing for that one.
All right. Next up, we had Cruiserweight Championship. Dean Malenko versus the Disco Inferno.
So I see Dean Malenko. I'm like, cool, I'm getting a Dean Malenko match. Then I see oh no, it's Disco Inferno.
Yeah. To his credit, this match was better than it had any right to be, but that's because it was more like a Bret Hart versus what's-his-name guy that we reviewed a few weeks ago.
Oh, I couldn't even tell you at this point.
Yeah, that fabled lost match. This was Dean Malenko carrying Disco to a much better match than Disco deserves.
Yeah, I mean, going back, like I honestly, up until listening to Killing the Town,
Don Callis, yeah.
I couldn't tell you who Disco was.
Yeah.
Then I go back and I'm wondering, why does Don Callis hate this guy so much?
And then you watch a couple matches and you're like,
oh, that makes more sense to me now.
Yep, this is pretty self-evident. All right. Oh, the night gets so much worse. Next up, we have Steve McMichael with Queen Deborah defeating Joe Gomez.
I mean, I nothing this match.
I don't know who Joe Gomez is. I think I tried looking him up at some point, and it did not tell me anything.
Yeah, he was in WCW from 1990 to 91. Went to the Independents for 5 years. Came back to WCW for 3, and then went. He was semi-active until like last year.
That surprises the shit out of me. I could not. I watched Nitro during these days fairly regularly. I would usually just watch the first hour of Nitro, then there was an hour of overlap show, and then an hour of Raw. I watched Nitro not religiously, but pretty consistently. I couldn't have told you that this guy ever existed.
It looks like a lot of his stuff with on Nitro and in WCW was a lot of dark matches.
I'm betting he was a staple of Saturday Night Main Event.
Yep.
And that would explain why I never saw him, because once Nitro started, I stopped watching the Saturday night show. Because, again, it was on TBS at 6:05. Don't know why TBS had this awful on the fives. I think it was because they were trying to have their shows be staggered slightly differently. So their shows wouldn't end at the same time everyone else's shows would end, so you'd be more likely to stick to their network.
Okay, that makes sense.
Which is an interesting gimmick, but it also meant you'd get invested into another show within the first 5 minutes and not remember to switch back over to TBS.
Right.
So,
yeah. So this guy held 3 different titles over the course of his entire career. He was a tag team champion with Tatanka in All-Star Wrestling.
Oh, clearly all-stars there.
Yeah. He was the NWA Florida tag team champion with Mike Graham once.
Okay.
And he is an 8-time IWF Tri-State champion.
All right, then.
Yeah. So, guy's a nobody.
Yep.
Moving on.
And Steve McMichael was fucking Steve McMichael and the worst thing in the ring.
Yeah.
He was awful. He's notable for one thing. His ex-wife.
Yes.
Who went way further in the business than he ever did.
Yeah. Which is kind of funny, to be honest.
Oh, it's hilarious. But, yeah, this was just trash. There is little words for how awful Steve McMichael was. And I'm going to go ahead and say is. Don't like the guy.
Yeah.
Never. Yeah, just awful.
That makes sense.
All right. Next up was a decent match. It was Ric Flair versus Conan for the U.S. Heavyweight Championship.
So again, on paper, should have been fantastic.
Yeah.
Was good, but could have been better.
Right. It was fine. Ends with Flair winning the belt.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure the only reason they had Flair win the belt was so they could have the NWO take it off of him later.
I would assume so.
Again, it was a fine match.
You know what I just noticed?
What's that?
We don't have the main title on this card at all.
Nope. It's part of the next match.
I know it's... Well,
because at this time, Giant was the champ.
So dumb. I hate early 90s to mid 90s booking and early
You actually hate mid 90s because the early 90s WCW was NWA and decent.
Early 90s WWF.
Yes.
Late 80s WWF, early 80s WWF, and mid 90s WCW, where your main belt is nowhere to be seen.
Yeah. Oh, you mean like Brock Lesnar
fucking
days.
Brock Lesnar.
Yes.
Guy has the belt for 567 days, and he shows up 4 of them.
Yeah. I mean, easy work schedule.
Gah!
Yeah, there's no better way to make your title seem irrelevant than to not have it around, which is exactly the opposite of what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it seem prestigious. They're trying to make it be like, oh, it's a big deal when this thing shows up. The problem is the underlying message is, hey, the show keeps going without this title being around.
Exactly. So,
like, if there's like some super big reason for the title not to be there, that's one thing. Like say in this case, the champ is involved in some tag team thing. That's one thing, but this really wasn't a big deal. This tag match coming up was by far not the most important thing on this card.
Exactly.
Your champ should be involved in the most important thing.
So, going back to that belt not really meaning anything, you've been following the Seth Rollins and Will Ospreay stuff that's been happening on Twitter?
Yes.
Did you see Will Ospreay commenting on the Universal title is not nearly as important as the IWGP Junior title?
Ooh.
He's not wrong.
So, I'm unfortunately going to cut the legs out from this argument a little bit. This was 2 wrestlers being 2 wrestlers. Like,
100%. It's a work.
Right. Like, it wasn't like a pre-planned work, but
they went with it to...
Right.
There's talk trash.
Yeah, there's no legitimate actual heat there. It was 2 wrestlers being wrestlers on Twitter, much like when Edge and Becky were getting into it a couple weeks ago.
Absolutely.
Like, no one actually thinks Becky and Edge are, like, going at each other.
I would pay to see that. I would pay to see that.
Okay.
However,
Why? I don't want to see freaking poor Edge get his neck broken.
True. But however, Will Ospreay is not wrong in that.
No, especially not after this year's Best of Super Juniors.
Yes. He brings up a very, very valid point with if I had to pick one title to hold between those two, I'm picking the junior heavy title based off of, again, the prestige of it alone. Look at the people who have held that belt.
No, sure. And you're not wrong as far as the lineage of the title goes. Public value of the title, I would argue Universal, obviously, there's just more eyes on it.
Well, yeah, because it's WWE.
Yeah, exactly. That, like, but I get what you're saying, and to an extent, you're right. Will's not wrong.
I mean, then you flip it the other way. I would much rather hold the, for as ugly as the belt may be, the NWA World title as opposed to the Universal title.
I mean, do I get the paycheck that comes along with holding that title?
Sure.
Okay, then I will take the Universal title, please.
But like the lineage of those belts, at least to me, means a lot more when it comes to quote prestige of it.
That's fair. WWE does need to rehab that belt. It's a title that was recently made, and it's going to be tough to kind of really quote unquote give it a lineage, but they definitely need to do something to make it really seem like it's a big deal instead of just saying, well, it's a big deal.
Right.
Show me, don't tell me.
Exactly. Because, again, out of all the people who have held it, it's been a guy who should retire, a guy who peaked at his career having it and hasn't done much since.
So, hang on, let's start at the very beginning. It was Finn, who was injured right off the bat.
Yep.
Then it was KO, who had an unfortunately really bad run with it.
Yep, and hasn't done much since.
Right. It was Goldberg.
Should have retired.
It was Brock. He's the one that held it for forever and a day, right?
Yep, 500-something days with it.
Did Roman ever take it off of Brock?
Roman took it off of
Right.
Brock.
Roman took it off of Brock. And
then had to give it up.
Then had to give it up. Then Brock took it back.
Yep.
And now Seth has it.
Yes.
Right. It's the real killer there is how the titles were lost more times than not.
Or given up.
Well, right, that's what I'm saying. It was given up twice due to injury or illness.
Mm-hmm.
Goldberg's run with it didn't really ever do anything.
Nope.
Brock's runs with it didn't really ever do anything.
Because he wasn't there.
KO's run with it didn't really do anything because he was too much chicken shit heel for KO.
Yeah. I mean,
like KO's
his NXT run where he's quote the prize fighter,
just killing people with pop-up power bombs everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. If they had given him that kind of run with it, cool. Even let him be chicken shit with Jericho every now and then, like as the backup plan.
Yeah.
But he needed to be built up a little bit more first.
Yeah.
Before going full chicken shit with it.
Exactly.
And then Seth's run now has been fairly unremarkable.
Yeah,
who's he faced since having it?
Corbin. He had one match with AJ.
If you had given him a program with AJ, we'd be having a much different discussion than his really long-running program with Corbin.
I don't understand why Corbin's got or is getting 3 pay-per-view matches.
Because the back office likes him and he has go-away heat instead of real heat, and at this point they'll take whatever they can get. I don't. I hate saying shit like that because I don't really know. But yeah, it's.
I mean, to be honest, on Raw, Corbin's really the only real heel.
Right. The bigger problem, which is so weird for WWE, how do you suddenly not have good heels? Well, they have Samoa Joe. Aren't they moving Joe up into like a world title program? Maybe?
Yeah, probably against Kofi on SmackDown.
Fuck.
There's no heels on Raw.
Joe versus Seth would be a great program. That would start building.
If that was the main event of 4 consecutive pay-per-views, they would be able to do a different match each time,
Right,
and still put on good shows.
Right. That's what I was just thinking. Is you could actually build a great program. Like, have the first one where Joe almost wins, but somehow there's a DQ against Seth. So Joe wins, but by DQ and doesn't get the title. Therefore, we get a rematch. And then, heck, give Joe the belt on the second one. Then we're actually going to have it's not the rematch clause. It's a legitimate, no, we want to see this. Like, maybe it was Joe wins, but it was an iffy finish, necessitating yet a third match.
Yeah, one of those kind of like with Ronda at Mania.
Right, exactly.
Oh no, Seth got his shoulder up, but ref didn't see it, so ref says it's Joe's belt.
Right, exactly. Have something where it's a little wonky, necessitating a third match. Third match, we could just completely have a schmaz finish, and now we have our fourth match where we'll make it some big, like, Hell in a Cell or a cage match. Make it something real,
something
special.
big.
Ladder match or something, maybe.
Yeah, TLC match.
Yeah. Between those two guys, they can both work amazingly well, and their character work, Joe's is real good. Seth's is good to definitely better than average.
Yeah.
Those two would have an amazing run. Yeah, give me them for half a year.
Cool.
And now suddenly, if Joe gets the belt and then faced AJ for it,
TNA all over again, please.
Right.
That was
The
the
good
only
parts.
That was the only redeeming factor of TNA.
right? Just give me the X division, but
Yes,
for the Universal
exactly.
title.
Exactly.
So okay, the belt is fixable, but it's not there yet. Which, going back to the original point we were making about that versus the IWGP Junior belt, yeah, there really isn't a reason yet that has shown why the Universal title matters.
Right. Why would I want that belt over the WWE belt?
Right. We are told it's a big prize, but nothing has shown it to me yet. And that's storytelling 101. Show, don't tell.
Right.
So,
it's not a big prize when it's got Velcro on it.
well, listen, just because you can get out of a vending machine. Okay. Back to the last of the undercard for Bash at the Beach here was WCW World Heavyweight Champion, The Giant, and The Taskmaster against the team of Arn Anderson and Chris Benoit.
Yeah, this was when they were kind of horsemen.
Oh, no, they were.
Were they still doing like the full blown?
Oh, yes. The four horsemen at this time were, oh boy, Flair, Arn Anderson, Benoit, and Steve McMichael.
Don't they kick McMichael out and bring in Malenko?
At some point in the near future, kind of.
So I guess that would make sense then as to why they would have Flair take the U.S. belt, because then they could have the NWO versus the Horsemen.
Right, exactly. That was kind of the plan.
That didn't really happen, though, did it?
Not really.
Because I feel like that could have been a really good, stable program.
So the problem was the Horsemen were firmly heel. And the NWO was firmly heel at this point.
And back then, we weren't really getting heel versus heel stuff.
Well, except for this match, which was the Giant and the Taskmaster, who were heels.
Right.
Because they were the remnants of the Dungeon of Doom, versus Arn Anderson and Chris Benoit, who were the Horsemen, who were firmly heels.
Yeah.
So this was the giant schmaz of heel versus heel versus heel versus heel versus heel versus heel, and it ends with Benoit just beating the ever-loving shit out of Taskmaster and woman trying to pull him off, who was actually Kevin Sullivan's wife at the time. This fucking mess.
Yeah. Not great.
No.
Not great at all.
Nope. And then we have our main event.
Here's where it gets interesting, folks.
Yeah, here's what the entire thing was building up to, this whole hostile takeover of Hall and Nash, who they annoyingly didn't even refer to them as Hall and Nash until halfway through the match.
They were the outsiders. The outsiders. The outsiders.
Well, it was the outsiders. It was the big guy,
Yeah.
who was Nash, and the other. It's really tough to call someone the big guy when Scott Hall is 6'7".
Yeah.
Like, yes, between the two of them, Hall is the smaller guy.
They should have just...
He's huge, though.
The big guy and the bad guy.
Oh, if they had said no, they had already been sued
Yeah.
by WWF at this time. If they had called him the bad guy, they would have been paying millions to Vince.
The big guy and the bad one.
Still too close.
The big guy and the awful one.
Oh no. It's,
The big guy and the mean one.
I understand what you're going for. I would have avoided the life out of it.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because they start this off as it's a 6-man tag match.
Right, because that was the big deal. Who's the mysterious third man of the Outsiders?
And nobody knows who the third man is. We don't get the third man until the match is almost over.
Right. It's a 2-on-3. So Hall and Nash are basically like, we don't even need a third guy right now. We got this.
Right.
It's against Sting, Lex Luger, and Macho Man, who all have their faces painted up like Sting.
Yep, different colors.
Yep. A couple minutes into the match, Sting goes for a stinger splash on Kevin Nash, who happens to be leaning over Lex Luger in the corner, and Lex Luger gets quote-unquote knocked out. He gets stretchered off, so it's just 2-on-2. Outsiders are firmly in control. Every once in a while, there'd be a bit of a sign of life from our faces.
From Sting and
Macho. Eventually, there's a spot where ref is distracted by Hall. Macho's in the ring with Nash. The ref gets distracted, and Nash just, like, upward double axe handles Mach in the nuts. It was like, so I don't like the current low blows where it's I'm going to put my bicep between your crotch and then just reach up and just hold my arm there for like 45 seconds.
This was a legitimate dick punch.
Yeah, this is a double-handed dick punch from behind. I was like, ooh, that was a little toasty.
Little snug there.
Yeah. So, yeah, he does that. Macho's laying there dead in the ring. And then, Hogan comes out.
And he was coming down the ramp doing
he's in the red and yellow.
Hey,
Yep.
brother, you can't be doing that. You're cheating.
Like, oh, I'm going to get you, brother. And the background is Hogan hadn't been seen since he lost the title to Giant like 2, maybe 3 months before this. He'd been gone for a while.
Yep. They just completely kept him off of everything.
Right. And
there was hardly even ever a mention of him.
Yeah.
There was occasionally like, oh, we haven't seen Hulk Hogan in a while.
I don't think there was even that, because in wrestling typically you don't mention when someone's gone so you can, surprise return. But I don't remember if he was injured. In listening to 83 Weeks, Eric Bischoff's podcast, I don't recall when the plan for him to be the third man was actually made, but I don't believe it was too terribly long before this. So, to the best of my knowledge, they didn't tell anyone that wasn't involved who the third man was. Oh, actually, that's something we can get to. Anyways, let's finish up the match and then we'll talk about some of the surrounding stuff. So, Hogan marches down in the red and yellow, points to Hall and Nash. He gets in the ring. Hall and Nash scatter. Then he drops the leg on Macho, drops the leg again, and the fans just start filling the ring with garbage. And then we have the New World Order.
And it's funny because it's the first time Hogan has been a bad guy in what? This was the first time he was a heel at all, wasn't it?
This is the first time Hogan had been a heel since 1981 in the AWA.
Yeah. 15 years without doing any kind of turn.
Right.
And we get probably the biggest possible turn that you could do.
Right. It was the right call. I mean, there's no doubt that was by far the right call.
Oh, it needed to happen. I mean, we were talking about a WWF pay-per-view, I believe it was a couple weeks ago. It was the Royal Rumble.
So a couple months ago, where
Flair wins the belt off of Hogan in the Rumble.
Right, yep.
And
how everything Hogan does.
Well, not only that he
was getting booed, yeah.
Everything he does was heelish.
Right.
But the fans hated him.
Yeah.
You have this I think was one of the earlier times where I've noticed that the guy that's being pushed is being booed more than the heel that he's being pushed against.
Yep. Yeah, Hogan was definitely... People were tired of it. It's like... I mean, a lot of it is... When it came to a promo, Hogan was great at doing like a I'm a good guy promo.
Yeah.
But his actions didn't match it.
No, the guy does eye rakes and...
Right, he like rakes... One of his big moves is to rake the back, which is a heel move.
He would even do the point and then a finger or a poke to the eye.
Did he?
He'd do the how dare you, brother. Boop.
I don't think he did.
He did it a couple of times on like actual TV.
Maybe, but I don't know about that. I think he might. Anyways, so big heel turn. We have the NWO. Everyone's just kind of devastated and just shocked and lost. Mean Gene comes in. We cut a promo. Hogan talks about the New World Order of Wrestling. And unfortunately, then 2 more times, he apparently forgets that it's supposed to be called the New World Order. And then talks about the New World Organization. Ugh. I mean, order is a difficult word to remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
The New World Organization just does roll off the tongue better.
To be fair, there was a lot of trash being thrown in the ring.
There was, and it was a big moment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all that said, can't really take that away from him. Okay, that said, during the show, at various points, we had Mean Gene backstage, and all of the announcers were asking him, hey, you're at the NWO, you're at the Outsiders dressing room. Who's the third man? Can you hear his voice? Can you hear it? He's like, well, I can barely make it out, but it sure does sound familiar. Motherfucker, it's Hulk Hogan. You've known the guy for damn near 20 years. You don't recognize the man's voice?
Right.
You're like the most famous person for interviewing him. You don't recognize his voice. That's your job, sir. Your job is to talk to people, and you don't recognize that voice. That's a pretty distinctive voice.
Right. Out of everybody that could be that third man, you don't hear behind that door a brother at any point or a let me tell you something.
Right, exactly. Like come on, man. Mean Gene is a legend, but I don't think he was that good.
See, I think he was good. I think it was a lot of the storytelling that he was put into might not have been the best, and
it was always always a little too much out of him, and he I think maybe for his time, I think the problem might be is that I'm looking back at him from 2019 at work 20, 25, 30 years ago, right, which in this day and age for storytelling doesn't hold up because he misses a lot of the funnier beats, a lot of he was not a nuance guy.
No, he was the guy that was...
There was no subtlety.
Let me interview you. Okay, bye.
Yeah. Let me ask you some point-blank questions. He throws a lot of, like, setup for softballs, and he doesn't really have any time or interest in subtlety.
Right.
Which I don't really care for. He was a product of the 80s. He was a bigger character, and I didn't care for that. But nothing against him personally. It was just, It became a little bit much. Yeah, so anything else to add to Bash at the Beach 96?
Let me do a perfect segue here.
Okay.
So, first time Hogan ever turns heel. Well, not ever, but first time in 15 years.
As far as most fans are concerned, ever.
We get arguably the best Hogan we've had in 15 years.
Yep.
Bischoff knew what he was doing with something like this.
Yep.
You think Bischoff could know what he's doing if we were to get a heel turn Roman now that Bischoff is running SmackDown?
Oh, I think that was a great call by Vince, first off, to bring in Eric Bischoff and Paul Heyman to run SmackDown and Raw, respectively.
Give me your reasons why, because I have one major counterpoint that I'm curious about with Bischoff specifically.
So I've been listening to 86 or 83 Weeks a lot lately.
Okay.
I've gone through about 6 to 8 months worth of podcasts in the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
He knows business. he does not, and this is self-admitted, he's not great at knowing finishes. And even in retrospect, he acknowledges when he made poor decisions, but he knows business and he knows storytelling at this point in time, at least. He didn't always, admittedly. He's a guy that, especially so for both a financial end and kind of a planning end, he knows the wrestling business as well.
Okay.
And he knows television production at this point in time. There's actually quite a few shows that he's been behind that weren't wrestling that have done decently, that he executive produced.
Okay.
So the problem the WWE has right now is they don't really have a great creative direction because they're floundering and they're making a bunch of knee-jerk changes, last-minute stuff. They're just kind of floundering and they don't have a strong direction. And I think Bischoff is actually good at setting a direction, and Bischoff hates gimmicky shit. The on a pole stuff really wasn't under Bischoff's watch. It was under Russo's.
True.
He doesn't like gimmicky stuff. He likes good storytelling with good characters. That's what they need right now, is they need to fix their characters because a lot of their characters are just bland.
Okay.
So that's why I think Bischoff will be a good fit. What's your issue with him?
So my issue, and we can kind of go back and look at what was happening at Bash at the Beach with those earlier cards. So we have a lot of the smaller guys, the cruiserweights, the light heavyweights, things like that Bischoff would utilize to open the show.
Right.
They got plenty of time to work, which I'm okay with. However, none of them got moved into a main event picture.
Right.
So my issue being is look at what SmackDown is right now. Aside from Seth and maybe one or two AJ, you have pretty much the indie darling setup on SmackDown. You have Finn. You have Aleister Black is going to be there.
Andrade.
You have... so I'm looking at people who are 205, 215 or less.
Okay.
Kofi, Finn, Andrade, Aleister Black's going to be there. DB. Unless Bischoff, and I haven't been listening to 83 Weeks as much as you have.
Okay.
Unless he's done some self-admitting that he used those people wrong, I'm concerned as to what's going to happen with these guys on SmackDown.
So I think what you'll find is what Bischoff would say. So first off, look at guys like Dean Malenko. He ended up getting pushed into the Four Horsemen. Same with Benoit. Jericho got a decent amount of time. He was TV champ. He was allowed to go out there and say a bunch of crap against Goldberg. Did they ever hit world champion level? No. But WCW at that time was kind of weird, and yes, looking back, we can say, oh, you relied too much on bringing in these bigger name guys running off former WWF glory. Be that as it may, that was still what was bringing in ratings, and you can't... They're having a problem with attendance right now. WWF is.
Right.
The problem right now is, yes, you do have to build new stars, which WCW arguably did, and Bischoff's stance is, yes, Ray, Eddie, Benoit all became giant stars. Jericho all became giant stars in WWF. But if it weren't for WCW giving them the exposure and getting them started, they wouldn't have ended up where they did. Maybe he did need to push them more at some point. But if you look at their trajectory, they were all still on an upwards trajectory in WCW at the time. They hadn't really... I mean, Benoit left as champ.
True. He did vacate the title and bounce.
Ray left as a tag champ. Like, he stayed to the end, and he was a tag champ at the time.
Yeah, that awful cruiserweight
Well, be that as it may. Eddie, yeah, that's a tougher one. Jericho was getting there. That was unfortunately some more backstage politics, unfortunately, than I don't necessarily know that was as much Bischoff's fault as some other folks. Getting into Goldberg's head and not giving him a good idea for how to do business properly, about how to make money for him and the company.
That's fair.
But basically, if you look at a bigger picture and don't get as tied up with, I like this guy, I wanted to see him do better, Bischoff's looking at the overall trajectory of the show and its ratings and so on, he really was doing the best for the overall product. Then it did come at the expense of some individuals, but we've talked that the rosters are almost so overloaded with talent now that there's no way to avoid that.
And I would get that much. However, and this is me with my limited TV knowledge, my limited ratings knowledge of anything. To me, it's fans want to see their guys do well. We can't have all of them do well.
Right.
We get that. However, you want to see some ratings? Put the goddamn main belt on Finn Balor.
Maybe so.
Put the main belt on Balor. Give him a program with Andrade again for the main belt, and give them a shit ton of time to work.
Maybe the problem is between what you've just set up is a great New Japan show where, yeah, these two are going to burn the house down, and the two of them could go for 30, 45, 60 minutes and be amazing. The problem is, why does the average person want to see that unless we need more of a story? It's WWE. They need a story. And that's what Bischoff can do, is he's better at building how much, there has been few programs in the world of wrestling that have drawn as much attention and as much interest as Sting beating Hogan at Starrcade 97.
Fair point.
They go into this a lot in 83 weeks. Unfortunately, at the time, Sting's head wasn't where it needed to be that guy to lead the company to further success. And there was kind of a cascade effect of what came after 97,
right,
and what came in 98. That was an acknowledged problem, and that really wasn't Bischoff's fault. That was basically Sting was having problems outside of the world of wrestling and didn't really show up to be that guy. The fans wanted him to be that guy. There was the support there. NWO had been running roughshod on the company for 18 months.
Yeah.
There was few things in wrestling that have ever had that much interest. I don't even think Austin McMahon did.
No. I
Sting versus NWO is possibly the pinnacle of, holy shit, do we want this and we want it. Take that as, if that's what it could be, we're in good shape. If Bischoff can do that, cool. I'm not saying he clearly has his flaws, but the guy he has a decent track record.
True. I'll give you that. But again, my concern is more towards the line of who's going to get used, who should be used. Let me reword that. Who should be used, and then on the flip side, who's going to get used. If Bischoff doesn't like the gimmicky shit, Finn Balor's dead in the water.
I don't know about that. When I say gimmicky shit, I mean like hardcore matches. Like, he hates hardcore matches.
True, and now that I think about it, he was the guy who came up with Crow Sting.
Yup.
Crow Sting and Demon Balor.
Yeah, I think he'd be fine with Demon Balor, because that's a guy that when he gets super emotional, when he hits a point, things change and become very serious, and it's a palpable guttural change, and
Yeah.
he likes that kind of stuff. I mean, I can't speak for him, obviously, but I think he'd be fine with it.
See, and the reason I have more of an issue with Bischoff is because I don't have the history of watching his track record.
Right, you also have the TNA days.
True. But on the flip side, I have more of a history watching SmackDown when Paul Heyman's in charge.
Yeah.
SmackDown was at its best. And you can fight me on this, and anybody can fight me on this.
I don't think you're not going to have any challengers on that one.
SmackDown was at its best when Paul Heyman was running it.
Fair. And I mean, look at, even recently, the DB versus Kofi thing was doing good for SmackDown. So
Yeah.
I don't think SmackDown's in a terrible state. I think they actually, it's so weird that WWE's in a position where they need more heels. Their heels right now aren't good, which is so weird.
Up until like 5 years ago, we had too many heels.
Up until like last year, we had too many.
There weren't enough good guys to face the bad guys.
Right. But the problem is also the good guys right now aren't great. There's more of them. But yeah, like it's such a weird place. So.
I mean, look at SmackDown. Arguably one of your best heels is a guy who was just a good guy. Daniel Bryan.
Oh, yeah.
And the last pay-per-view, you had him cheered through the building because he was the hometown boy.
Well, there's certain things you can't really overcome, like when Ric Flair's a heel and we're in Charlottesville.
Right.
There's only so much we can do.
It was just kind of funny. I'm sitting there watching it, and everybody's cheering Daniel Bryan, and my wife goes, I thought he was a bad guy. Oh, he is.
Yeah, he is, but, well, we're in Seattle. So
It'll definitely be interesting to see what happens. I don't think they can go backwards from where they are.
I don't think so either. I think it's a good decision. I think Bischoff will do well because, I mean, what are the biggest complaints against Bischoff? Is that he didn't build new stars well enough. You almost have no option right now on SmackDown but to do so.
Right.
In a worst case scenario, who's he going to... So he's not in charge of talent. He doesn't have the ability to bring in older guys.
Nope, that's still Trips.
Right. So he doesn't really have the option to fall back on the, I'm just going to bring in Hogan and put in Piper and Warrior, and those guys don't really exist.
And that's, I think, probably the best position he can be in.
Right.
Because Trips is going to be like, do whatever you want. These are the guys you're getting.
Exactly. So right now, what's the worst case scenario for if we have to fall back to like the quote unquote oldest guys on the roster? Feel like at least guys that have been in the company. Dolph versus Kofi? We're already there.
Right. Or, I mean, we get our truth pushed a little bit more.
Okay, fine, whatever. Like,
we reach out and bring Goldust back from AEW. I mean,
that ain't happening. So, right. I think it's going to be okay. It can't be any worse than it is.
All of a sudden, Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins are tag team champs on SmackDown.
No, wait, aren't they currently the Raw champs?
No, Revival took it off of them, remember?
No. Honestly, no.
Yeah, Revival got the belts again.
Okay, cool. And aren't they due to lose it to like Jinder and someone else anyways soon? I know he's hurt.
Yeah, no, I think they're going to end up losing it to the Good Brothers.
Cool, fine, yeah. Okay, bring in the club. Like,
right. That'll be the worst that could happen is all of a sudden the club shows up on SmackDown instead of on Raw.
Right? So, I mean, we're in a position, we're almost kind of living in the worst case scenario right now. So there's really not a whole lot of place to go but up.
That's what I said. They can't go backwards.
Like, again, worst case, cool, Jinder comes in and takes the world title off of Kofi. All right, we've been there before anyways. We can get through it again.
At least we have a heel that could do it.
At least we've got heat now.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, we're now in a world where Jinder winning the title is actually okay.
It's not the worst thing that could happen.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, yeah, like, right. Honestly, they could give it to Baron Corbin. That's our worst case scenario.
But again, at this point, sure.
Yeah, fuck it, fine, whatever. It's something. We're trying something at least.
Right.
All right. You got anything else for this week? I think we covered everything that's really to talk about.
Yeah, I think we hit everything.
All right. We're history.